Well, this has been quite an extended weekend, hasn't it? There's a lot of questions in people's minds. I think I'd like to address myself to that just a little bit today. Let's go to the heart of the matter. What does God have to do with what's going on in LA, around the country, around the world? Let's get to the point. Nothing. Not one thing. And once you understand that, we're going to be a lot better off. And once you understand that it is because we don't realize that it's the absence of the awareness of what God is doing that an aching void exists. I want to lay some background for this, and I want you to please make a note of this. The liberals have proved they don't have an answer, but the conservatives don't have one either. Amen. I was listening to Patrick Buchanan, and all I could say was bless his heart. He so missed the point that it's almost like saying, and I don't want to sound unkind, I thought the dinosaur was extinct. I think it should be obvious to everybody what E. Stanley Jones told them in Russia at the turn of the Bolshevik Revolution. He said these words, you might want to make a note of them. If you won't be just, you can't be secure. If you won't be just, you can't be secure. The thing that I rejoice is that the whole country and the world is discovering what a minority knew for a long time. This is why, for years, black folks did not call the police, we called them the law. They were the law. Amen. In other words, they were the judge, the jury, and the prosecuting attorney. The question is, when you look at this, you have to say, the liberals said, we got to spend more money. So we spent more money, and we got another riot. The conservatives said we got to have law and order. They left out one thing. You got to have those who administer law and order who are just. And so neither have solved the problem. So I want you to understand, if you vote, go ahead and vote. But that ain't the answer. The answer is so simple that we miss it. I want to tell you something else. People say we've gotten away from morality. Morality is the problem. Remember, there were no people more moral, at least in word, than the Jews, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. And they were the ones who were at the foot of the cross saying, away with him. It's the moral people who will kill you thinking they're doing God's service. Every religion has its concept of morality. And the history of humankind is that every religion has felt like they had the right to use the sword to impose its morality. Can we go even deeper? The family has broken down. What family has broken down? What family has broken down? See, when people think family, they think a family that's a nuclear family with a husband, wife, father, and mother. That's nonsense. There have been upstanding, upright citizens who have come out of single-parent families for years. Amen. And you know I'm telling the truth. My father died when I was 3 years old. We had a single-parent family. I never went to jail. I was born and raised in the ghetto before I knew it was a ghetto. I was grown. They were telling me after I was grown, did you know you grew up in the ghetto? No. Don't tell me a mother alone can't raise her sons. Are you there? Hallelujah. Now I want you to please make a note of this. The nuclear family is not the family. The only family is when we recognize we are all family. Are you there? Your family is not defined or confined by your biological connection. Every one of us in here, we're family. And when we start acting like we're all family and start treating one another like we're all family, things are going to change. You can't define family in socioeconomic terms. You can only define family by understanding what the scripture says. Out of one blood, God made all nations to dwell on the face of the earth. Amen. We all came from one blood. How many of you understand that? Amen. I was in Africa, thanking God to be back to the motherland. And Africans reminded me I didn't look like them. So I'm going to have to go somewhere else to find the motherland. And it ain't in Africa, believe that. Amen. There's somebody in Europe. There's nobody in Africa with the name Garlington, believe that. Isn't that exciting? You know, years ago, we left Buffalo, driving to Cleveland to celebrate Thanksgiving. And we took a lot of food. We took a big turkey that Mom had cooked, and in Erie, you ought to know, never go through Erie unless it's August. Because you can run into snow through Erie just about any time. We ran into such a snowstorm that buses, tractor trailers, I mean, if you didn't have four-wheel drive with chains, you weren't moving. I'm telling you. You know, farmhouses had to open up because we were out in the boonies. And I looked as we lay in the basement of this farm family's home, there was about 50 of us in that basement. The Red Cross had to fly in. I'm telling you, food. for us. And you want to know something? We didn't see white or black. We saw what we need to do for mutual survival. I mean, we had some lapses. I mean, Mati found out when they took her turkey that they that they cut that turkey up and made soup out of it so it was spread. Mati wanted to know what happened to her turkey, you know. And we had to say, "Now, Mati." We're all sharing here, you know. This is what we're doing to survive here, Mother. But the interesting thing is, in the crisis, we acted like family. When the crisis was over, we went back to acting like we used to act. And that's why I say, where is God in all of this? Nowhere. And the problem is quite simple. The scripture says, when they knew God, they did not honor him as God, neither were they thankful. So they became vain in their speculation, and their foolish heart was darkened. Now, how many of you would like to see where is God in all of this, as far as your life is concerned? Turn with me to Psalm 91. Psalm 91. Verse 1. He who dwells in the Democratic Party forgive me. He who dwells in the Conservative Republican Party, what did it say? He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High. What will happen? Will abide in the shadow of the Almighty. I want you to please make a note of this. This is what we're going to talk about. The secret is the consciousness of God's presence. The secret is the consciousness of God's presence. I believe that what we will see more and more of is people who understand that it isn't Christians taking over either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party. I don't trust Christians anymore, and I trust anybody else. Amen. And all you got to do is go through the yellow page listing of Christians and call one of them to do business for you. And you'll find out that Christians will sue you just as quick as anybody else, mess over you just as quick as anybody else. You know what I'm saying? And then go to church and lift their hands and close their eyes and talk about how wonderful it'll be when we get to heaven. And you know I'm telling the truth. And so the secret is to recognize that it is the consciousness of God's presence that we've lost. It isn't God's presence we've lost, because you can't lose God's presence. Because where is God going to go? He's already everywhere present at the same time. But the secret of life is to realize that transformation of your life, of your situation, of your circumstances comes when you have the consciousness of God's presence. Now, the thing we've got to come to is this. People may not agree with this, but I'm sorry. I've learned the hard way. There are no victims. There are no victims. There is nothing more futile, nothing that subjects you to despair like being the eternal victim. We've got to understand that what empowers the powerless is to give up the belief that you're a victim. Are you with me? If you are a victim, you will always be a part of the underclass, the underemployed or unemployed. You have to recognize that as long as you're a victim, you are looking to somebody else to extricate you from your dilemma. The answer is inside of you. Jesus said you're going to find the kingdom inside of you. God reigns and rules inside of you. Now this may bother you because we like to have somebody to blame. But you get back in the catbird seat when you begin to recognize, no matter how upset you may be, no matter how angry you may be, don't be angry at anybody, don't be angry at yourself, don't be angry at the system. It's absurd to talk about the system. Systems don't perpetuate themselves. People run systems. The secret is give up being a victim. Amen. I want you to just write this down somewhere. I refuse to be a victim. Are you with me? If you're like the man, as the joke goes, I'm going to tell you up front, it's a joke. But they said this man married this woman. He thought she was a fabulous woman, perfect woman. Then they went on their honeymoon. She took off her wig and she put it one place. She took out her teeth and she put them another place. She took off her falsies and put it another place. She had an artificial leg and she took that off. And after a while the guy got out of bed. She said, "Where you going?" And he said, "I'm going to go find my wife." You got to decide, folks. You hear what I'm saying? Even if you feel like I got duped, you can't be a victim. Because all victims can do is be angry and justify in their own minds striking out, lashing out. Are you there? Every person who's a victim is also consumed with righteous indignation, and they think whatever they do to you is justified in their own minds. Now you know I'm telling you the truth. If you're going to accept who you are, accept your dignity, your worth, your value, you've got to stop being a victim. You may be addicted to some kind of substance abuse, but you still are not a victim. You may have gotten in a bad marriage, but you still are not a victim. You may have been conned, but you still cannot get out of it if you insist on being a victim. Are you there? It's time to realize that it's going to take courage to stop being a victim, but you got to recognize you'll only find the power in you when you stop being a victim. Are you there? Because every victim is convinced that he or she is powerless. Every victim is convinced that the only way they're going to be free is that they got to strike out and change the status quo. All change begins with you. Please make a note of this. All change begins with you. And if I'm running into problems, it means that I have departed from the living God. I have lost the consciousness of God's presence. What does it mean to dwell in the shadow or in the shelter of the Most High and abide in the shadow of the Almighty? It means to live daily. This is your only responsibility in the consciousness of God's ever-presence. Now, I'm not saying don't vote, but I'm telling you right now, the secret of life is living and moving in the reality that God is present. And he describes a kind of a cocooning, if you will, that occurs to one who lives in the consciousness of the presence of God. Look at what he says. I will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust, for it is he who delivers you from the snare of the trapper. Remember now, as you abide in the consciousness of his presence. From the deadly pestilence, say it with me, as you abide in the consciousness. Do you understand? Ultimately, the secret of being free from AIDS, from the fear of AIDS, is not condoms. It is the presence of God. Do you understand? Because, this is just an aside, folks, but especially in the inner cities, condoms are not the problem. It's drugs. It's using intravenous means of administering drugs that's passing on AIDS. Are you there? Giving a drug addict a condom is not the solution. Why doesn't this occur to somebody? Is it too obvious? And so here's what he says are the benefits. He will cover you with his pinions. Under his wings you may seek refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and bulwark. In other words, you have to understand the issue is God and what you sense of his presence. We had an interesting experience flying back last night. We had a smooth flight until we began our descent into Rochester. And all of a sudden, the wind started just whipping that plane around. And some of you may not be aware, but we're doing the finishing touches on the book that I've been writing. And there's a chapter that we have in there called Begin with God. And Gladys, who normally just starts to turn green when this happens, had been reading that chapter. And she sat back and just began with God. She started focusing her attention not on the problem, but on God. And she was saying, this stuff really works. It really does. When you begin to understand what Paul said, living in the consciousness of God's presence, none of these things move you. Do you understand? In other words, all problems can be traced not to we have had a breakdown of the family. Because first of all, you can say, well, it's the absence of the father in the family. I didn't have a father in my family. He was gone. He passed away. And we weren't illegitimate either, you know. He married my mother before he died. But you got to understand that it's also this absurd nonsense of saying that what I needed was a black man in my life. The truth of the matter is there were a number of white men who related to me in a positive, affirming way, who were just as significant in my life as black men. Do you understand? The issue isn't color, the issue is love. It's finding somebody who loves you. Are you there? Because when I grew up in the ghetto, my house was broken into twice. It wasn't a white person that broke in my house, it was a black person. I'd rather be loved by a white person than robbed by a black person. Amen. It's time we got this thing in perspective. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because I don't understand. I'm saying, you know, protest all you want to, but to me, burning down your neighborhood to protest seems to me like shooting yourself in the foot. I'm trying to work this out. It don't make sense to me. Somebody got to help me. I guess I'm missing something somewhere. Now, when you upset me, I'm not going home and burning down my house because you upset me. You understand what I'm saying? I would much rather deal with my anger and keep my house. But I straight. The consciousness of God's presence is what we got to get back to, and we got to begin to recognize the family that is the family, and the only family is the family of you live in the consciousness of God's presence, I live in the consciousness of God's presence. We who all do that begin to discover the geometric principle. Things equal to the same thing are equal to each other. Family gets created not by biological creation. Families get created when we begin to understand, when we all return to God, we return to each other. And I want to hasten to add, returning to God ain't joining the church. Returning to God is not embracing religion. Returning to God is not embracing a new kind of morality. Returning to God is coming back to the recognition that it's not enough to know God is present. We need to know He's present. Please look at this. You will not be afraid of the terror by night. Did you hear that? Or of the arrow that flies by day, or the pestilence that you. Say it with me. It shall. Now, quickly, turn with me to Psalm 78. Psalm 78. I used to be a real big man in the community. I'm sorry, Psalm 73. I was head of the inner city churches. I was second vice president, Genesee Ecumenical Ministries. They actually almost had me thinking they couldn't make it without me. Very dangerous. Very dangerous. It's amazing how quickly people regroup and keep on when you die. It's amazing. You understand what I'm saying? And I began to realize that I could bring people together in a meeting quickly. I may be telling something out of school, but here it goes. I could bring them together quickly if a white cop shot a black guy and the cameras were going to be there at church. Channel 10, Channel 8. But if I said, let's come together and let's pray and let's open ourselves to see what we can do to take responsibility for our lives, for the community, everybody got busy. And that's when I decided I'm going home. They haven't seen me. Some of them wonder where I am. Here's where I am. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High shall abide. And that's where I am. Amen. Folks, let's be clear about something. Let's be very clear about something. When you got two men beating the daylights out of a man, you got 10 cops standing around. The man they're beating does not have a weapon. It doesn't matter whether he's white or black. That ain't right. At what point do you say, we have subdued him? You know what I'm saying? When do you realize, I think you can handcuff him now? You know what I'm saying? This is why I believe that the comedian was right when he said, if you see somebody, the cops beating me, put the camera down and help me. Do you understand? Forget taking pictures, help me. It doesn't make sense. Nobody has to ask, is this anger? The point is, I don't care how angry you are. That doesn't entitle you to go burn down somebody else's property. But that still doesn't change the fact they beat the daylights out of that guy. Now, how can you avoid that? The only way you can avoid that is begin to recognize, I can't wait for the police to get their act together. You understand what I'm saying? I have compassion on the police. Let's get our heads together. Because every time the police stop somebody for speeding, you don't know what's in that car. Every time the police ask you to open up your glove compartment or they ask for your license and registration and you say it's in my glove compartment, they don't know what's in your glove compartment. I have compassion on the police. I realize that they are in jeopardy, at risk most of the time. I understand that. But that doesn't stop me from having compassion on Rodney King. That's kind of like when we were growing up, you know, and parents be whipping you, you know what I'm saying? And asking you questions like, are you going to do it again? And you're saying, Mom, as long as I live, I won't do this again. Even when I have left you and I am grown, I won't do that again. Oh, yes, you will. Well, you know, didn't they do that? No. Your head's hard. You're going to do it again. Let me lay it on you some more, you know. Yes, we keep talking about this. It was funny. I thank God for my brother John now. Because Mutty sent me to the store one time and I thought she wasn't going to be so hung up on her change, you know what I'm saying? And so she wanted me to know, you don't mess with my money. You don't spit in the wind. You don't pull on Superman's cape. And you don't spend Matisse change. You know what I'm saying? And so John said, Mom, don't kill him. Don't kill him. Even in the family, we realize there's a point when you know you made your point. You know what I'm saying? Whew. We've got to be clear about this. Saying we don't need police is ridiculous. I don't want to be walking down the street and there's not any police. And if somebody is mugging me, I am not standing there saying, get me a black cop either. Get me a cop with a gun who has a stick. And I want a cop that if they don't stop mugging me, he will do whatever's necessary to save me. But that still doesn't change the fact that they needed to recognize when they made their point. And you can't have justice if the administrators of justice are unjust. Are you there? Now look at chapter 73, verse 24. I'm sorry, verse 28. Would you read it for me? But as for, say it with me, as for me, come on, the nearness of God is my good. Are you there? The nearness of God is my good. Isaiah 11, verse 9. They will not hurt or destroy in all my holy mountain, for the earth will be full of what? The knowledge of the Lord. Come on, as the waters cover the sea. Let me just quickly, in a nutshell, tell you what my vision is. There's a lot of Christians who believe that as they get involved, you hear them saying, we need godly people in government. I don't believe that's the solution. What we need is more and more people who live in the consciousness of God's presence. You say, well, how will that change things? I have good news for you. Jesus said, a little leaven leavens the whole lump. All you need is a very small percentage of the population who's actually living and walking and moving in the consciousness of God's presence to leaven the whole lump of what we call society. Rediscovering our culture is not going to save us. Getting involved politically, getting what we call godly people in government is not going to save us. What's going to change things is more and more people who live and move and dwell in the secret place of the Most High. And you want to know something? People like this carry with them an aura, an atmosphere. There's a peace that you feel when you're around them. There's a joy that you feel. And you want to know something else? People who live in the consciousness of God's presence see their family everywhere. Do you understand? Now, I don't know about you folks, but my family is more than just black folks. Are you there? My family includes everybody. Now, There are people in my family who don't include me. That's not my problem. I include them even if they don't include me. Are you there? How many of you have found a family that's bigger than your family tree? In fact, a lot of you need to chop that family tree down. Whew! And you need to find a family tree that reaches back to God. Amen. There are people who are what we call light green. I told you the story. Let me tell you the story again. When they had busing and they were bringing the white and black kids together and they were having all kinds of violence and problems, and so this white bus driver said, I got a solution to this problem. He said, nobody's black, nobody's white, everybody's green. So ask the kids, what color are you? Green. Ask the white kids, what color are you? Green. Black kids, what color are you? Green. He said, all right, now you dark green kids, get to the back of that bus. So, I just want the record to show that I've got family, close family, family that I love and I know loves me, that's light green. Amen. I'm not going to deprive myself by talking this nonsense. And when I hear people talking about going back to find their culture, I see walls coming up again. When I hear people talking about I'm going back to find my roots, I see walls coming up. Amen. If you haven't found the root and offspring of David, you've got the wrong root. Amen. You'd be just as effective to go find the root man as to find your family roots. Woo! Look at somebody and say, this man is telling the truth. And so I just want to tell you before we leave, when people say, where is the pastor? How come he's not out here? Because it's none of my business. I was out there before. I came to my senses. I now realize you want to see change? Give me 2 people who are committed to live and move in the consciousness of God's presence, and they can do more than 1,000 demonstrators out there. This is what the scripture meant when it said 1 will chase 1,000, 2 will put 10,000 to flight, 3, 100,000, 4, 1,000,000. We're moving. Come on, stand with me, please. Amen. Come on, look at somebody and say, we're family. Well, I like the way they said in What About Bob? This is the fam. Come on, get your hands together and just say, we're fam. Amen. Somebody will say, well, what did you do to get to be family? Nothing. It was already so. We just acknowledged that we were already family. Amen. Say these words. Lord, bless these words unto our hearts and glorify thy name. Thank you, Lord, for the joy of the consciousness of your presence. Thank you, Lord, for the family, for the relationships that we find when we are conscious of your presence. Amen. Go in peace.